I'm Jess Goddard.
And I'm Sam Bear, and today we're answering some of y'all's questions. The first question is, what bottled water has the lowest levels of lead? We did a study of 100 different bottled water products, and we actually detected lead in only one of them. 99 of them we did not find lead in. So most of them. There are other studies with smaller sample sizes, but there's one we know of that detected lead in 5 out of 30 samples. The point being, the majority of bottled water that people have analyzed does not have lead.
What brand didn't have lead or had lead in the study we did at SimpleLab?
It was a Whole Foods 365 distilled product that has mysteriously disappeared. We cannot find it again to retest. So don't worry, that one's not out there.
So Veggie Lauren asks, we may purchase a home with a whole house reverse osmosis filtration system. I keep reading mixed opinions about if it's healthy long term to drink since it filters out healthy minerals. Opinions? Should we keep it or remove it? Well, first of all, reverse osmosis for a whole house is a pretty expensive product. So if there's already one there and it's relatively recent or has been maintained well, that's a pretty good system to inherit. You just want to make sure that you're updating all of the filters, pre-filters, in accordance with the manufacturing specifications for that filter. So I'll just say that that's from the get-go, you're kind of dealing with, you don't have to deal with the upfront cost of the RO system, which is often what we're talking about when we're thinking like, what could we do that's not RO because it's so expensive? As far as the opinion about if it's healthy to drink, most RO systems have a remineralization step, which means that once the water's gone through the system and it's been kind of stripped of everything, they add back in minerals like calcium, magnesium that are healthy. So it's possible that your system already has that. And if not, it might be something that you'd be able to add. So I think it's a great option. You could always test before and after to see if you're getting the minerals that you want in the drinking water. But yeah, I'd probably keep it if I inherited an RO system.
Do you know if there's any problematic contaminant in your water? Is my question, because you may not need to be treating it at all. And RO creates a lot of wastewater, right? So you're wasting like a bunch of the water that comes in. So it'd be worth knowing what's in your water that you're trying to remove, if anything. But
yeah, that's a good call. So you could basically test the water coming into your house before the system, and get a pulse on that before going down the route of like the maintenance costs and all that too.
Yay. Thank you, Jess. Okay. Water Ninja is asking about lead in their water. So they say buying a house and the water test came back positive for lead at 0.022 ppm, which is 22 ppb. Bacteria and chemical came back negative but shows signs of lead. The house is on well and septic and hasn't been used in 8 months, plus the wellhead was recently replaced because it was broken for a while. Could this have anything to do with it coming back positive, it being lead? Results. The house was built in 1991, so there should be no lead pipes. Anyone have any advice? First of all, awesome. I like that they already knew that the cutoff of when lead pipes were banned is in the 80s. The lead is likely coming from somewhere in the system. They're aware they probably don't have lead pipes, but like, what's the wellhead made of? What are the fixtures made of? And with the water just sitting for a long time, like any like minor corrosion or any lead being like liberated from deposits in the pipes or stuff will be sitting in that water. It's like the first flush kind of. So I would expect the lead is coming from the infrastructure, and I wonder if after flushing it for a long time, if the lead will go away, because it's highly unlikely. Like, it's not it's very, very unlikely that the lead is in the water that's coming out of the ground. It's getting in there somewhere along the way. So let's see, any advice? I would say flush everything out for a while, and if you still have lead issues, I would recommend a point of use filter, because unless you have children like drinking bath water, you still have lead after flushing everything for a long time. You really only need to remove lead from the water you drink and cook with. Like, you can shower in it, you don't breathe it in, it doesn't go through your skin. So I would recommend like an under sink unit in the kitchen or something like that to remove lead. And there are a lot of different options for technologies, but I would say test again after everything has been flushed for a while. And I don't know what well heads are made of, but it could have, like brass or something.
Typically PVC piping and stainless steel. So my guess is that it doesn't have to do with the wellhead being broken. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. You think like little fixtures or solder or something,
Yeah, it would depend, like what you were saying about the sampling if it's been sitting in the water. I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me, that you'd have an accumulation even if there were fixtures and faucets which still have lead in them to some degree today. So yeah, I think your advice is what I would take too.
All right. Good luck, Water Ninja.
So Justin Fowler says coliform in the water means that there is some source of fecal contamination in the water. Fecal coliform are pretty much everywhere and on everything. This is not a question, but a comment. And coliform in the water does not necessarily mean that there's fecal contamination in water. Coliform is an entire genera of bacteria, and there are plenty of types of coliform that are not necessarily from the guts or colons of animals or humans, but it is often used as an indicator to identify whether there may be fecal contamination. And to identify that, you have to test for coliform and then do follow-up tests if you find coliform to identify the species of coliform. In those cases, you might find fecal coliform. So it's an indicator. It doesn't say for sure whether it's in the water. And fecal coliform, I think the second statement is a little bit of it's an overreach in the sense that fecal coliform are everywhere where there are like livestock and agricultural activities, but it's not something that's just everywhere on everything. I think a lot of us would be getting sick a lot more if there were fecal coliform on everything, but it's a major thing we have to control for in our drinking water systems because of the fact that agricultural lands can have a lot of fecal coliform that gets into source water and the like. So I would say this statement is almost fully true, but the second statement is not totally true. It's not everywhere. It's not on everything.
Okay, so Bridget Danner is asking whether we've seen a lot of radioactive elements in tap water and if distilled water is a better choice. So I'll start with question one. We do see radioactive elements in tap water a fair amount. They're naturally occurring in groundwater in a lot of places. So something like uranium is like, it's really common if you're on a well or your city gets their water from groundwater. It's at pretty low levels, but yeah. So I would just say that is, and then there's like gross alpha and gross beta. There's a lot of different radioactive isotopes. And yes, we see them commonly when the water is sourced from groundwater. Is distilled water a better choice? So distilled water is a pretty specific thing. I wouldn't recommend it for drinking just in general, because distilled water, like ideally, literally everything is removed from distilled water. The water is heated up and then like leaves contaminants behind and recondensed. So it should be pretty pure. Sometimes some VOC, some volatile compounds end up staying in it because they recondense with the water. But the point is, almost everything is gone. Distilled water tastes kind of flat, there's no minerals, and it's pretty intensive process, so it costs a bunch of money. If you do it at home, you have to do it in batches and it takes forever, and it's mostly just not necessary. So in general, I don't recommend distilled. If there are like high levels of radioactive elements in your water, I would recommend getting a treatment system to remove them. There are all kinds of things like ion exchange and standard treatment technologies that remove those if you're on a groundwater source that does contain radioactive elements, because that's not a guarantee. So you would need to check first.
Okay, Jack from Tiny House. I think we've had questions from Jack before. Isn't high TDS kind of bad? Not necessarily. So total dissolved solids is really the total of all dissolved solids in your drinking water. And so that includes both good things and bad things. So typically, if you have really high TDS, you might have high turbidity also. So you see that your water is kind of cloudy, and people might be concerned that this is necessarily a bad thing. But it's really just an indicator. So you could indicate, okay, high TDS, there may be things in there that we want to dig into deeper. And then you'd want to do tests following up to see what actual contaminants or analytes are in your drinking water. A lot of treatment companies go around and have a little probe. It's really easy to measure. So you can just have a quick measurement and say, what's the total TDS? But this really doesn't tell you good or bad. It's just an indicator. So we can't really say anything about the quality of the water. And it's something that we get asked a lot. And it's a big reason for why lab testing is so important, because you can have really low limits that the machines are reading and specifying what contaminants are found and how much. Whereas with TDS and these meters that people use, you're really not saying anything quantitative about your drinking water. You're just making a qualitative statement about the total dissolved ions.
Jess, what are the ions that typically make up the bulk of TDS in drinking water?
Yeah, basically calcium, magnesium, any
Sodium,
other
chloride.
sodium.
Yeah. TDS dissolved solids isn't the same as suspended solids too, right? So dissolved solids means like salts. So I would say typically high TDS, I mean, there are bottled water with super high TDS because they have a ton of like calcium and magnesium and things that people like because they taste good. So in that case, not bad at all. So yeah, anyway, I support it. Totally depends on what is making up the TDS. It can often be totally benign things, and you have this big number, and it's just something like chloride or magnesium. It's not like anything bad. So depends. That's all.
All right, that's it for today. Those were great questions from Reddit and Instagram, and we hope you enjoyed watching. Shoot us more questions about water quality. We'll do our best to answer. We don't know everything, but we do know a little bit about water quality. So you can leave your questions and comments or send them to us on any channel where TAP Score is active, and we'll leave links in the description. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.